She was 23 years old, and she had been waiting to live for almost 20 years. She just didn't know it yet. When she was 8, she told herself, life will be better after school. At 16, everything changes after my board exams. At 21, college is just the beginning. Then came her first job. Once I'm financially stable, then after I get promoted, after I buy a house, after I finally have time. Every chapter ended the same way, with another after. Strange, isn't it? Because if someone asked her, when did your life actually begin? She wouldn't have an answer, not because she wasn't living, but because she was always preparing to live. And here's the unsettling part. She isn't the only one. Maybe, without ever realizing it, you've been doing exactly the same thing. But why? Why does the human mind keep convincing us that the life we've been waiting for is always just one milestone away? The strange part wasn't that she kept waiting. It was she never noticed she was waiting, because waiting didn't feel like waiting. It felt like being responsible, being ambitious, being practical. When her friends invited her on a trip next year, when her father asked if she'd join him for an evening walk, maybe this weekend, the guitar she'd promised herself she'd learn slowly became part of the furniture. The camera she'd bought to capture memories never left its box, not because she didn't care, because she believed life would have more room for those things later, and somehow, later became one of the busiest places she'd ever lived. It was everywhere, just over the next exam, just beyond the next salary, just after the next promotion, always close enough to believe in, never close enough to arrive. Then one evening, she noticed something she'd never noticed before. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done something that wasn't preparing for something else. And for the first time, a question quietly entered her mind. What if I've been treating my entire life like the trailer instead of the movie? That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because something was wrong, because for the first time, something didn't make sense. She had spent years chasing moments she was certain would change everything. Finishing school, getting into college, landing her first job. Each one had felt like the beginning of a brand new life. Yet somehow, every beginning had quietly become just another ordinary Tuesday. So she did something she'd never done before. Instead of asking, what's the next thing I need to achieve? She asked, why does every finish line keep feeling like another starting line? And strangely, she wasn't the first person to wonder. For decades, psychologists had been chasing the exact same question, not because people lacked ambition, but because something about the human mind kept moving the finish line, almost as if the moment you finally reached it, someone quietly picked it up and placed it a little farther away. The question was, who? For the next few days, she couldn't stop noticing it. It was everywhere. A little boy walked past her, pulling his father toward an ice cream shop. I'll get you one on the way back. They never came back. A couple sat together at a restaurant. Neither of them looked at each other. Both were busy planning next month's vacation. At work, everyone talked about Friday. On Friday, everyone talked about Monday. It was almost funny. Nobody seemed to be where they actually were, including her. Then she remembered something. The guitar. She'd bought it 4 years ago. She smiled. She had spent weeks reading reviews, watching videos, imagining herself playing it. The day it finally arrived, she could barely sleep. She played it for 3 days. After that, it quietly became another piece of furniture. She stood there, looking at the thin layer of dust covering it. And for the first time, she didn't ask, why did I quit? She asked something much stranger. Why was I happier imagining it than actually having it? That question would end up changing everything. That night, she opened an old photo album, not because she was looking for answers. She was just looking. There she was, 8 years old, holding a bicycle she'd begged her parents to buy. She remembered thinking, this is going to be the best day of my life. She smiled, then turned the page. Her graduation, another page. Her first office ID card, another. The keys to her first apartment. Every photograph captured a moment she had once believed would change everything. But something strange happened as she kept turning the pages. She couldn't remember What happened next? She remembered waiting for those moments. She remembered dreaming about them. She remembered working for them. But actually living them, that part felt blurry, almost as if her mind had been so busy running toward the next chapter, it had forgotten to read the one it was already in. She closed the album. And suddenly, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. How many of today's memories am I accidentally erasing while waiting for tomorrow? The next morning, she decided to try something. Nothing dramatic. She simply stopped. Whenever she caught herself saying, "I'll do it later," the results surprised her. She wasn't postponing big things. She was postponing tiny ones, watching the sunset, calling her grandmother, taking the longer road home, reading one more chapter, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee. Somehow, life wasn't disappearing all at once. It was disappearing, 5 minutes at a time. One later here, another tomorrow there, until years quietly stitched themselves together, and then she noticed something else. Whenever she finally reached one of her goals, her mind barely stopped to celebrate. It immediately whispered, "Okay, what's next?" It never said, "Look how far you've come," only, "Keep going." For years, she thought that voice was her. Now she wasn't so sure. Maybe it was never trying to make her unhappy. Maybe it was only trying to make sure she never stopped moving. And somehow, those are two very different things. Weeks later, as she drove past her old school, on impulse, she stopped. Everything looked smaller, the classrooms, the playground, even the corridor where she'd spent years dreaming about growing up. She smiled because she remembered something she'd completely forgotten. At 14, she couldn't wait to leave this place. She was certain real life was waiting outside those gates. Standing there now, she realized something almost impossible to accept. Back then, this was the future she'd been dreaming about. She was already living the life her younger self had prayed for. And yet, she was still waiting for another future, another version of herself, another day that would finally feel like life. She closed her eyes for a moment, then quietly laughed, not because anything was funny, because for the first time, she caught her brain moving the finish line right in front of her. It had been doing it for years. She'd just never seen it happening, and once you see the trick, it never looks the same again. That evening, she went home, and for the first time, she stopped making plans. She simply sat by the window, watching people walk home, children laughing, a man carrying groceries, an old couple arguing over something neither of them would remember tomorrow. Nothing extraordinary was happening, and somehow, that was exactly the point. For years, she had treated life like an exam she hadn't passed yet, as if joy had to be earned, as if happiness needed permission, as if ordinary days didn't count. But maybe that had been the mistake all along. Maybe goals were never meant to decide when life begins. Maybe they were only meant to decide which direction to walk. Because the destination was never supposed to replace the journey. It was only supposed to give it direction. She still wanted to travel. She still wanted to build a career. She still wanted to become someone her younger self would be proud of. None of that disappeared. The difference was, she stopped asking those dreams to postpone her life. She let them inspire tomorrow without stealing today. And somehow, that changed everything. The strange thing is, life doesn't begin the day you reach the next milestone. It begins the day you stop asking permission to live it.